In part 3 of gun setup today, we're going to talk about the importance of optic mounting. Gun setup part 3. Today what we're going to cover is going over optic mounting. So optic mounting is obviously a pretty critical piece. If you haven't mounted an optic before, this is going to be a good first time review. And if you've adjusted your length of pull or your height of comb, there's a good chance you might have to move your optic if you already had it installed. So we're going to go over some of those technical procedures of how to mount the rings and tighten down the optic so it stays put and so you don't damage it. First thing that we're going to do in setting ourselves up for success is kind of lay out and go through all the tools that we'll need. So one big one is you're going to want a torque wrench in inch-pounds. So I like to use these Wheeler fat wrenches. They come with an assortment of different heads and stuff. Really great tool, super handy. The next thing you're going to need is Loctite. So you can use Loctite or a similar type thread locker. These is going to be really important. So today we're using blue 242, or you can use 243 also as a substitute. This is going to be critical for making sure that stuff stays in place, right where we left it. A lot of manufacturers are going to say, oh, just torque it to spec, you're going to be good. The reality is, anytime you load those threads and then you back it back off, it's not going to have quite the same staying power. And it's the Loctite. Ask me how I know. Last tool we're going to need is levels. So I like to use these small little Empire levels. Really any sort of level. You can even use your iPhone if you really wanted to. All right, so let's get right into it. Today we're going to be mounting this Nightforce NXS 3-15 on the M24. So what I want to do first is I'm going to set up my rings. So these are some standard Nightforce Ultra rings, a simple cross bolt pattern. When we're mounting these guys on, I like to put these first. I always like to give myself a little bit of room to play with when I mount stuff up. But what I mean by that is I don't necessarily want these rings all the way out at the extreme edges of my rails, because we may find that you have to shift it later on. So I usually like to go in about 1 notch on the Picatinny rail and call that good. Now, first thing I like to do is hand tighten these guys down. This is going to hold them in place. Now, an important thing here to do is when we're putting these guys on, what I want you to do is make sure that you slide the ring all the way forward towards the muzzle against that Picatinny lug. We want to do that with both of these because that's going to prevent any sort of possible slippage occurring. Once it's hand tight, we're going to go into actually torquing this down. So you can use the Wheeler fat wrench with a 1/4 inch bit adapter to a 1/2 inch socket. Or you can do the old school method, which I'm going to show you today too, using just a regular 1/2 inch crescent. So when you come to hand tight, the old school way of doing this for your traditional steel, or in this case a steel titanium hybrid rings, what we're going to do is we tighten it down, hand tight, and then you're going to come in with a crescent wrench and make a 1/4 turn. So when you make this 1/4 turn, this is bringing these rings just about 65 inch-pounds right there. When it comes to actual torque settings for the cross bolts, please do look and make sure that you know your manufacturer's torque specs, because there is some variation between materials and styles. But as a general rule of thumb, 1/2 inch cross bolts on rings, traditional rings like these, you're going to be right around 55 to 65 inch-pounds. Next part, we're going to go ahead and set up the actual optic on the gun. First thing we want to do is make sure that the gun itself is level. So you go ahead, mount up a bubble mount such as this, and we're just going to make sure that the gun is leveled out. That way when we mount our optic, we're going to also level out the optic to make sure that's sitting tight. All right, we're ready to put our optic in place. Before we even start tightening this down, this is where we want to look at our eye relief. When we're setting up our eye relief, basically we're trying to move the scope back and forward so that our eye rests naturally in what we call the eye box. The eye box is kind of what you might think of as a 3-dimensional box of the exit pupil as you look behind the scope. And when we're sliding this back and forth, trying to find the sweet spot, we want to make sure that we're on maximum magnification. When we go to maximum magnification, this is the optic's least forgiving setting. And so that ensures that if you can get good eye relief at this maximum magnification, in this worst case scenario, as you dial out, you're going to have plenty of room to play with. Rule of thumb for starting here, I always like to take the rear of the optic and pretty much line it up with the very back tang of a Remington 700 action, or likewise. Another good way to go about that too is if you're mounting on an AR platform, pretty much come to the back of the charging handle, and you're going to be good. So now with our optic placed correctly in the rings, we're going to talk about leveling out the optic itself. Go ahead and take your level and you rest it right across the top turret there. And make sure that your optic's sitting level. With our rifle level and our optic level, now that reticle theoretically should now sit level with the entire gun. From here, we're going to go into putting the ring caps on. Our ring caps, as they go on, and as we insert the screws, we want to go ahead and make sure that we start just going hand tight. Kind of just like we did with the cross bolts. So I'll usually go through and I'll drop these ones in and slowly begin to hand tighten. Now, what we want to do when we're hand tightening is we want to create a nice even gap on either side of the ring base and the ring cap itself. We want to avoid having one side pinched down and the other side wide open. It doesn't have to be perfect. We want a nice even distribution of torque when we start tightening stuff down. So that right there looks pretty well balanced to me. Go back to the back one and do that one as well. All right, so both caps now have a nice even gap on them. You can go ahead, put in the rest of the screws, hand tight, making sure that that gap maintains consistency. All right, with the ring cap screws now hand tight, what we're going to do is go back and we're going to take each one out and apply a small dab of blue Loctite to the threads. Reinsert that, and then we're going to tighten down to torque specifications of approximately 15 to 16 inch-pounds using our torque wrench. So as you can see right there, we only want to put a small dab. There's a saying, a little is a lot and a lot is a little. So don't go too crazy. Just a small dab about the size of a pinhead is all you really need. All right, final thing we're going to do for tightening down the ring caps is we're going to go back through with a torque wrench in a cross pattern, tightening each one back to its torque spec of 15 to 16 inch-pounds. So here we are starting on the front left side, and then we're going to go to the front rear. Alternate back here, we're going rear front, then we're going to go rear back. Come to front right, I'm going to go front left rear, and repeat that all the way back through here. What this is going to do is make sure that we have a nice even torque load all the way across the caps, so not one side is holding more than the other. Last but not least, go ahead and double check, make sure that we are still level. And that is the technical portion of mounting your optic in rings to the rail. As always, if you guys have any questions about this, you can reach out to us on the web or in person, and we'll be more than glad to help you along your way.